Coming up on the Believe in Jets podcast, the Jets are 1-0, baby. Good start. We're always good in the preseason. It feels like once the season gets going, it goes a little bit downhill from there, but I'm positive still. I still have my positive outlook on the season. But the Jets, are they as positive as I am? There's reason to believe that they as a franchise are less positive and are scared. I'll explain that and a whole lot more coming up on the Believe in Jets podcast right now. Welcome back to the Believe in Jets podcast. My name is Rami Lavi. Bilal's not joining us today, but we have a lot to talk about and also a preview of later this week as the New York Jets have officially played their first preseason game. And so there's some stuff to get into. Finally, we can talk about football. Football is here. We got to see the New York Jets on the field for real, not a scrimmage, not a practice, in pads. Now, granted, none of the actual Jets played, and we could talk about that in a minute. So we'll get into that in a second. But first, before we get into the fact that no one from the Jets actually played, can we talk about the uniforms? Because the first time I know we saw it last year, but knowing that this is going to be the full-time Jets uniform, we got to see what that looks like on the field on a Sunday, this time a Saturday, I guess. And it looked incredible. I loved what I saw from the Jets uniform. It looked fantastic out there. I wasn't there to see it in person, but just seeing those uniforms, it's such a departure from what we saw last year. I almost wish, what I think about with Aaron Rodgers, because with Aaron Rodgers, he wore that uniform for that dumb one preseason drive that he had against the Giants. I know it was actually two drives. Everyone says one drive because everyone remembers the touchdown to Garrett Wilson. I think the first drive, they didn't do anything on offense, and so he came back out for a second drive, and they had a touchdown drive. But that stupid drive against the Giants, everyone remembers that drive. And guess what? If Rodgers never plays, we'll have never seen him in this uniform because, of course, he got injured in the current uniform, which is the good uniform. So it's almost upsetting. Like Aaron Rodgers had a time that he wore that dumb, stupid uniform for what? For a stupid preseason drive? For a touchdown against the Giants? If we do ever have, and I'm still hopeful that we might, but if we do ever, as Jet fans, have good memories of Aaron Rodgers in a Jets uniform, it's a shame that we'll have some memories, or at least one memory, that Aaron Rodgers touchdown to Garrett Wilson in that uniform. Now, the alternative of this is that's the only touchdown we ever see him throw as a Jet if he gets hurt again. And that's the next place I wanted to go. We didn't see any of the Jets play. And the idea is that the Jets are terrified. And I hate this. I cannot stand that the New York Jets are terrified that their karma, their luck is going to catch up to them. Remember, there was a whole debate when Hard Knocks started last year. And Robert Saleh gets up there. He goes, we're getting rid of the mantra, the same old Jets. We're getting rid of that. No, by saying it, you're leaning into it. You're not getting rid of it. And it just was one of the dumb things that Robert Saleh says because he's dumb, or at least he sounds dumb when he talks. He might be very smart. I don't know. But he sounds like a moron when he talks. And it was one of those things that I was so incredibly frustrated that I was like, damn it, Robert Saleh, why can't you just not say these idiotic, moronic things? And generally, as is the case with Robert Saleh, what he says is the opposite of what he's intending to accomplish with what he's saying. He ends up accomplishing the opposite. When he's trying to minimize a story, he usually makes the story bigger by talking too much. We know that that's the case with Robert Saleh. So when he said, oh, we're not the same old Jets anymore, that was leaning into them being the same old Jets. That made them very much the same old Jets. And so it's the same thing here. When they are terrified that someone's going to get hurt again, they didn't put Aaron Rodgers out in a joint practice against the Commanders because it was a little bit rainy. And Willie Colon, former Jet, was actually on WFAN on Friday. I got to meet him, introduce myself. Obviously, he played with Bilal. He's friends with Bilal. So I went over and introduced myself. And we were talking, and he's like, the Jets put out Mike Williams coming off an ACL in the wet practice, but they couldn't put a fully healthy, supposedly Aaron Rodgers because they're so terrified. Everything they do is so backward. It seems so simple to everyone but the Jets. The Jets find a way to screw everything up. And I didn't think I was going to be coming on this episode and right away complaining about everything. And if you listen to this show and you're like, oh, you complain too much, Maybe, but what if I had to be positive about? Really? And I am positive going into this year. I think this team will be really good, and we'll get to my win-loss prediction, and we'll talk about some of the scheduling stuff and all those different things. There's a lot to get to as it relates to the New York Jets. I think there's a bunch of really positive, really fun things that we could talk about as the season goes on and as we get closer to the NFL season, which I'm really excited for. We're going to have Bilal back on the podcast. He's done with his training camp portion of his coaching as he coaches high school. So he's done with the training camp portion. So he's going to be coming on to talk Jets with us a lot more as we move forward. But again, I don't know why. And my point is that I'm pretty positive about the Jets. Like, I'm feeling good about this year. But can you blame me if I'm a little bit just upset and frustrated with some of the dumb things that we keep seeing them do? Because this is what they do. It's the Jets. They always do frustrating things. And it's, well, frustrating. So one of those things was I got to see Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne playing together. I saw, obviously, Patrick Mahomes was on the field. We saw Tank Dell catching passes from CJ Stroud. We saw Joe Burrow throwing a touchdown to T. Higgins. The idea that nobody plays in preseason anymore is actually not true. We saw a bunch of starters. Hey, the Jets went up against a bunch of starters. I know it's the Commanders and the Jets kind of own them anyway, and we'll get into the game itself in a minute. But the point is, the good teams are not terrified that their guy's going to get hurt. And this goes back to the conversation I had with Antoine. It goes back to the conversation I talked about that I had with my father, where I said, well, it can't be worse than last year because all it takes is Rodgers to play 5 plays and it won't be worse. And my father's like, well, he could get hurt in preseason. And the Jets are operating like that. For me as a fan, I'm allowed to say that. I'm allowed to say, well, he could get hurt in preseason. That's the Jets. That's what happens. The organization, you have to act like, no, we're good. We're not that anymore. We got rid of that. There's no bad mojo. There's no bad juju. That's fake. We're actually a really good franchise with a really good team right now. There's no reason why we shouldn't be. Rodgers is healthy. There's no reason why we shouldn't win. And yet the franchise operates in such fear. It's terrible to watch. So when you go around, you watch the games and you're seeing all these things. And Robert Saleh said to the media something that honestly bothered me so much was Robert Saleh said to the media, well, my thing is the third game is really the big preseason game. The first couple of games, I don't play anyone. Maybe you should look around the league and you shouldn't have a thing. The guy who's 20 games under 500 as a head coach shouldn't have a thing. I'm sorry. Your style clearly doesn't work. So if it's your thing, maybe you should change it. Maybe you should look at Andy Reid and what he did and his thing. Maybe you should look at Zach Taylor and what he did and his thing. Or Doug Peterson, a Super Bowl winning champion head coach, and what he did. Or even DeMeco Ryans, who has way more success in 1 year as a head coach than you have in 3 years as a head coach. Have you thought of that? Maybe you should copy and try and emulate their things. Because your thing clearly isn't working, Robert Saleh. So you know how he goes to the media. Well, my thing is, the third game is really the dress rehearsal. And then Willie Colon said another great point. You're going up against the Commanders and then against Carolina, 2 terrible defenses, and you're going to wait to play them against the Giants, a really good defense where there's pride involved, and they want to kill Aaron Rodgers and kill the Jets. That's when you're going to wait. That's what you're going to hold him for. Just nothing makes sense with the Jets. Everything is so frustrating with this team. Everything has to be, they just do everything wrong. There's so many things that feel like such easy answers, and the Jets get it wrong. And then the explanations from Saleh are just terrible. So it's just frustrating. But the game itself was played. And so with all the frustrating things and the way they operate, I'm not going to change any of that. The game itself was played. Braylon Allen is my number one takeaway. Anyone who watched this, I think that was their number one takeaway. Seeing what this kid is capable of, Braylon Allen. He trucks some guys. I saw Baldy did a breakdown. You could check it out. A lot of people posted every rushing highlight or every highlight from Braylon Allen. Him in the pass blocking game on third down. Him in space where you get on the ball and he's in space. And he can just, once he gets to that second level, and I think Saleh said this, well, he's impossible to tackle. If you don't get him with one of the linemen or a linebacker, those big guys, good luck if you're a safety or a corner trying to tackle him one-on-one. You can't do it. So extremely, extremely impressive day from Braylon Allen. And this is what we talked about. I went on For the Love of the Game with Aaron Tobin Hess, that podcast on Believe Podcast Network. And he asked me what I'm looking for going into the season. I said, Braylon Allen, this is a big factor. I talked about it Obviously, with Antoine, I talked about it when I went on the Believe in Commanders podcast last week. This is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for these guys, Braylon Allen and some of the other young guys, obviously, and Malachi Corley, and another young guy in Jason Brownlee. Everyone loved what we saw from Jason Brownlee last year in preseason, and then the season disappointed, and then he was hurt. He's been hurt this preseason, and it seems like in this game, he took that second step. He took that next step. I made a joke last year how the Jets have 5 quarterbacks. They might, or earlier this year, I said they could go with a 5 quarterback rotation. And if you look at it, they had obviously Andrew Paisley, they had Kobe Suits, they obviously have this guy now, Adrian Martinez, who played really well, 6 for 10, 104 yards, a 95 QBR. You know what's great, though? Of all the 5 quarterbacks that this team has, none of them are named Zach Wilson. That's the best part of this. The Jets have 5 quarterbacks now that are all better than Zach Wilson. And you know what? I knew this was going to happen when I saw today that Zach Wilson played. I was like, oh, Zach Wilson, by the way, the 3rd string quarterback for Denver. This is a team that doesn't have any good quarterbacks. They have Bo Nix. They have that other guy. They don't have good quarterbacks, and yet they have 2 that are better. They played Stidham and Nix over Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson was the 3rd string quarterback. But amazingly, some of these Zach Wilson truthers, which is mind-boggling that Zach Wilson truthers still exist. The idea that Zach Wilson truthers, like today, against 3rd stringers, literally guys who are not going to make the roster, guys who are going to be cut within the next 3 weeks. That's who Zach Wilson was playing against today. And he went 10 for 13 with 117 yards and led 2 scoring drives. Wow, he got the W. Look at Zach Wilson, he's back. The Jets screwed him up. Oh, this was the Jets' fault. Look, if you want to talk about past quarterbacks, the Jets screwed them up, I agree with you. I think Sam Darnold was screwed by the Jets. He never had the talent Zach Wilson had. Zach Wilson will never be a good quarterback. I swear to God, there are going to be people, these same fucking Zach Wilson truthers, who are going to look at Zach Wilson when he's in the fucking CFL in 2 years, or he's playing Arena League football, and they're going to be like, see, look at Zach Wilson, look at that throw. The Jets screwed him. When he's doing that in the CFL or Arena League football, because he's not an NFL quarterback. The fact that he had a decent game, he didn't even throw a touchdown, we're going crazy over a mediocre game against 3rd stringers. Guys, in week 1 of the preseason, before any cuts, you know what that means? All those guys, every single person who was on the field against Zach Wilson will not be on an NFL roster. Some of them may make a practice squad, but everyone else, those 11 guys, none of them are going to be on an NFL roster. None of them are going to log a single NFL minute this year. These are 3rd stringers. They're not even backups. They're not special teams players. They're maybe practice squad players. Most likely, not even that. They're maybe CFL players, Arena Football League players. These are the worst players at the professional level. Sorry, that's what it is. And that's what Zach Wilson is. He's a guy with a ton of arm talent and can make some flashy plays, but he's not good at football. He's not an NFL quarterback. He doesn't put the work in. He doesn't study. He's just the worst possible quarterback you could possibly have. We have 5 quarterbacks now that are all better than him. And instead of focusing on what Adrian Martinez did, you're going to have people coming out of the woodwork and going, see, we screwed him. It's all the Jets' fault. Look at that. Aaron Rodgers. Why did we go after him? We should have built it around Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson was given every opportunity. The first offensive coordinator didn't work out for him. They brought in someone else. They got him the great running back. They drafted O-line for him. They got him Garrett Wilson. Zach Wilson had every single opportunity. He sat behind Aaron Rodgers and had a chance to learn. I know it wasn't as long as he wanted. They gave him every opportunity to succeed. Sam Darnold had a head coaching change after 1 year, had multiple coordinators. His best wide receiver was Robbie Anderson. His best running back, by the way, was Bilal Powell at the end of his career, the tail end of Bilal Powell's career. This is not that. This is not the same scenario. Zach Wilson has had every opportunity. I can't believe I'm still talking about it, but I knew that the second he played with 3rd stringers on Denver, everyone was going to be going crazy for him again. And I can't believe I looked at social media today and I was seeing the same dumb things that I've been seeing for years about this kid. Just nonsense. People who don't understand, you morons who don't understand football, who can't comprehend basic football. Those are the people who love Zach Wilson. I'm sorry. I'm not one of them. Zach Wilson sucks. He always will suck. He will never be. I can say this with full confidence. He will never, ever be a successful NFL quarterback on any level. Sorry. That's how it is. Deal with it. And that's what I'm saying. These people who are still holding on to that are people who are never going to give it up. They could be seeing him playing in the flag football league when they do flag football in the Olympics in 4 years. And they're still going to be saying, oh, that's Zach Wilson. See, the Jets screwed him. Shut the fuck up about Zach Wilson, please, and thank you. I got to bring it back down, calm down, breathe a little bit. I'm actually going to take a quick break and then talk about the rest of the stuff with as it relates to the Jets, because that got me way too riled up. So quick break. We'll be right back. As we resume here on the Believe in Jets podcast, I'd like to remind you all that today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to basketball to baseball to Formula One racing. Yeah, Formula One is racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head to one of our online casinos and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today and get in on the action. You can use your promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit of up to $250. BetOnline, the game starts here. I like what I saw from Jaden Daniels, so a couple of BetOnline bets if you want to bet them. I know the Jets beat them still. The Jets did win against the Commanders, as angry as I might sound. The Jets did beat the Commanders, and the Commanders 6.5. I kind of like that. I think the Giants are going to stink, although they have a pretty easy schedule as well. I think Philly's going to take a step back, as I heard from Diana Rossini talking about the relationship between Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, how terrible it is. She's like, yeah, even when they were winning, it was bad. I mean, this doesn't sound good at all. So that relationship sounds like it's a little bit shaky. So Philly might not be as good. Dallas has a lot going on there. The CeeDee Lamb's not there. Micah Parsons, they have to pay him. Obviously, they have to pay Dak. Do you really believe that Mike McCarthy's a great coach? There's a lot going on in Dallas. So maybe, just maybe, you could see Washington having a surprising season. They're number 6.5. Go to Bet Online, bet it, get your bonus bet, and bet the 6.5. And I think you'll be actually pretty pleasantly surprised that Washington has a decent season. The other thing that I watched was Olu Fashanu. Obviously, with a lot going on with the Jets offensive line, people talk about how improved it is. He's going to be a big part of this because he's their depth piece. He's not a starter, and I love that going into the year, the pressure's not on him to be a starter. I love Morgan Moses. I love John Simpson. I love, obviously, AVT and what we've seen with Tippmann and, obviously, Dwayne. I almost said Dwayne Brown, but his name is Tyron Smith. Sorry, I blinked for a second. But I love their starting offensive line, but we're going to need to see depth pieces. Obviously, last year, the big thing was injuries, and Carter Warren was moving people out there. Olu Fashanu was moving people out there. Those two guys are going to be a huge part of this offensive line as depth pieces, and I trust them. I loved what I saw from Carter Warren last year. I loved what I saw from Olu Fashanu last year. Some other things that I did clip up here. Greg Zuerlein hit a 58-yard field goal. We know how I feel about Tom and Greg. The Disgusting Brothers. Greg the Leg, so underrated that it's just like when you have a guy, and you just saw the Chiefs did this with Harrison Butker, who I know is now a controversial figure. It's not like whatever. Anyway, I'll leave that alone for now. But the point is, he's controversial, and I don't agree with what he said, but we know that NFL athletes in general have done far worse than the things he said, right? I think what he said was dumb and ignorant. But to act like he's the first person who's done something wrong and then got paid anyway, I don't know. Look at Henry Ruggs. Look at Jordan Addison. Look at any of these guys in the league who sometimes do terrible things. The only guy who actually had to pay like a consequence for what he did was Ray Rice, because he wasn't as good anymore. So his talent wasn't as good. So whatever. Not the point. My God. I'm getting so sidetracked on this episode. I apologize. But Greg the Leg, having a kicker, my point, the reason I got into Harrison Butker was having a lockdown kicker that you could just trust, that you never fear, that your heart isn't pumping when you get to that point late in the game and you need a big field goal to tie a game, or obviously in the Super Bowl. It's worth a lot. And that's why the Kansas City just re-upped with him. And Greg Zuerlein has been that guy for the Jets. We're just cool, calm, collected, and nails them. Jason Brownlee has an opportunity, I really think, getting back to him for a second. We talked about the young guys. He could jump some people on the depth chart. If it's him, Corley, he could challenge Alan Lazard certainly for playing time, as bad as we saw Alan Lazard. I think Emmanuel Forbes is done with seeing Jets players in Jets uniforms. We obviously know Emmanuel Forbes was the corner who got absolutely torched by Garrett Wilson all week in the joint practices. And now he got crushed by Jason Brownlee as well. So, a lot to talk about for the Commanders defense. Still a lot left to be desired. But this is not a Commanders podcast. I did go on the Commanders podcast last week. So a lot still there to unpack. But look, overall, I'm excited for Jets football. I'm glad we got to see the uniforms. I'm glad we got to see them on the field. I am upset about how they run some of the things. Like I said, I'm upset about how they do some of the things with they operate in fear. They say dumb things in the media. Certain things are extremely frustrating. But overall, I'm so happy that Jets football is back. It's one of the most exciting times of the year, this time of the year. And I can't wait for the regular season to get going. I just want everyone to be healthy. Look, I understand the risk of playing Aaron Rodgers is not worth the reward of him getting, or the risk of him getting hurt is not worth the reward of him just playing meaningless games. But at the same time, you can't operate with, we're the New York Jets. Whatever bad can happen will happen. That's how I think, because I'm a fan. You're the franchise. You're the organization. You have to be better than that. And I'm sorry I hold you to a better standard than me as a fan. I'm crazy. I'm a fan. I'm an idiot. I'm a moron. I'm literally stupid. I just watch this and I have crazy takes about it and I'm emotional. You're not supposed to be like that as the organization. I'm sorry. So that's all for this game. I mean, there's not a ton to break down. Maybe we'll see some more stars as the preseason goes on, but it sounds like the first two games we're not going to see anyone. So it'll be the Giants game, which is the toughest game of the three. That's where we're going to see people. But if there are more headlines to talk about it, of course, Bilal's going to be back on. But later this week, I have an awesome interview, and I can't wait to do this. I have a really fun interview with Ian O'Connor. Ian O'Connor just came out, or is coming out soon, with a book called Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. He sat down with Aaron Rodgers for 2 hours. It was a book he was working on for over 2 years about the life and of Aaron Rodgers. It's an unauthorized biography, which basically means that Aaron Rodgers can't filter it. He wasn't going to take things out if Aaron Rodgers denied it. So it's unauthorized by Aaron Rodgers. But Aaron Rodgers did meet with him for this book. He's also written biographies about Bill Belichick, Derek Jeter. So I'm going to have a chance to talk, and he's a really, really respected journalist, and I really want to thank the people I believe who have given me the opportunity to interview and arrange for this to happen, to sit down and talk with Ian about the book. It's going to be a fascinating episode on probably coming out later this week. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to put a specific date on it because, sometimes things happen and I'm my busy schedule. So a little bit later this week, we'll be talking with Ian O'Connor about that book, and you should definitely go buy the book when it comes out, pre-order it now. So you don't want to miss that. And then we'll have Bilal hopefully in the next week or two as well. As he is prepared, he's ready to come back and continue doing the show. We talked a lot. We're excited. We're fired up. Willie Colon told a funny story about how right before Bilal scored that touchdown against the Giants that year, the 2015 year with Todd Bowles, Willie was injured and he got called for a penalty because he was on the field arguing, even though he was injured. And so he said Todd Bowles was seething at him. And we don't think of Todd Bowles that way, as a guy who's can be that angry, but he said no. Todd Bowles actually had there was two Todd Bowleses. There was the soft-spoken Todd Bowles that we saw in the media, and then there's the Todd Bowles who could rip and lay into these guys. And he said just staring at him the way he did was like the stare of death. So it was a funny story. And then Bilal bailed out our guy Willie Colon, or my guy Bilal Powell bailed out Willie Colon and got him by scoring the touchdown there and got him off the hook for that penalty. So a funny story there. I want to confirm that story with BP, of course, a little bit later. But until next time, like, subscribe, share the podcast. I appreciate you all for listening. It helps us grow. Until next time, see ya. Let's go Jets.